What are you? Look in the mirror, what do you see? You see a face, a body, you recognize it as your own. But is that collection of cells, that physical form, really you? You have a name, you have a history, a collection of memories that seem to belong to you and no one else. You have hopes for the future plans you are making right now. You feel a sense of being an agent, a thinker of thoughts, a feeler of feelings located somewhere behind your eyes. This feeling is the starting point for almost everything we do. It is the center of our universe. But what if this feeling is an illusion? What if the you that you think you are is not what it seems? This is not a trick question. It is perhaps the most important question you can ask yourself. The sense of being a stable, continuous self is something we all take for granted. It feels real. It feels solid. But modern science and careful introspection are beginning to tell a very different story. They suggest that this self, this pilot in the cockpit of the body, might not exist in the way we think it does. This is a radical idea. It can even be a frightening one. The feeling of being a self is powerful and persistent. It's the narrator in your head, the one who is experiencing your life. When you feel joy, you think, I am happy. When you feel pain, you think, I am suffering. This I seems to be the constant subject of all your experiences. It seems to be the one thing that remains unchanged as your body ages, your thoughts shift, and your circumstances change. It feels like the core of your being. But if we look closely, if we really try to find this self, it becomes surprisingly elusive. Where is it located? Is it your brain, your thoughts, your memories? This investigation is not just an abstract philosophical game. The belief in a separate, enduring self is the source of a great deal of human suffering. It is what makes us feel isolated. It fuels our anxieties about the past and the future. It drives our ego, our pride, and our conflicts with others. By examining the nature of the self, we are not just satisfying our curiosity. We are opening the door to a different way of experiencing the world. A way that is less burdened by the constant, exhausting project of defending and promoting a self that may not even be there to begin with. The question, what am I, is not new. It has been asked by philosophers and mystics for thousands of years. It is a fundamental part of the human condition. We are, as far as we know, the only species on this planet that is burdened by this kind of self-awareness. A dog does not seem to worry about its identity, it simply lives. But we humans are different. We construct elaborate stories about who we are. We build our entire lives around these stories. Our sense of self dictates our choices, our relationships, and our sense of meaning and purpose in the world. It is the foundation of our entire psychological life. This inquiry matters because your experience of the world depends entirely on your sense of self. If you feel like a fragile, isolated self, you will experience the world as a threatening place. You will be constantly on guard, worried about what others think of you, and anxious about your future. You will cling to pleasure and desperately avoid pain. This is the default state for most people. It is a life lived in a state of low-grade and sometimes high-grade anxiety. The feeling of being a vulnerable I trapped in a world of others is a recipe for dissatisfaction and conflict. Consider how much of your mental energy is spent on yourself. You worry about your health, your career, your reputation. You replay past conversations, imagining what you should have said. You rehearse future encounters. Most of your thoughts are in some way about me and mine. This constant self-preoccupation is exhausting. It is a prison built of thoughts. But what if there was a way to be free from this prison? What if you could experience the world directly, without the constant filter of the ego? This is not a fantasy. It is a possibility that opens up when we begin to deconstruct the self. Understanding the self also has profound ethical implications. Many of our worst behaviors, from simple greed and envy to violence and war, are fueled by a strong sense of a separate self. We divide the world into us and them. We see others as competitors or threats to our own well-being. This is a direct consequence of feeling like a distinct entity, separate from everyone and everything else. If we could see through this illusion of separation, it would change how we relate to other people and to the world at large. It could be the foundation for a more compassionate and rational way of living. So, where do we begin this search for the self? Our first instinct is to look inward. We try to find the thinker of our thoughts, the feeler of our feelings. You can try this right now. Close your eyes. Look for the you that is having this experience. Look for the one who is hearing these words in your head. You can find thoughts. You can find feelings. You can find bodily sensations. But can you find the one who is experiencing them? The harder you look, the more this sense of a central self seems to dissolve. It is a strange and unsettling experience. For centuries, this question was primarily the domain of philosophy and religion. Thinkers from ancient Greece, Buddhist sages of the East. They used logic, reason, introspection to explore the nature of identity and consciousness. These traditions offer a wealth of insights. They challenge our common-sense assumptions and force us to confront the deep strangeness of our own existence. But these approaches have their limits. Introspection can be unreliable. Philosophical arguments can go on forever. This is where modern science enters the picture. In the last few decades, neuroscience has developed powerful tools for studying the brain. We can now look inside a living human brain and see it in action. We can see which areas become active when we think, when we feel, or perceive. This gives us a new way to approach the ancient question of the self. We can now ask, what is happening in the brain when we feel like a self? Is there a specific network or a self-module in the brain, or is the self an emergent property of many different processes working together? Let's begin our journey with a very familiar idea. It comes from the philosopher René Descartes. He was a 17th century thinker who gave us the famous phrase, "I think, therefore I am." This single sentence captures a powerful intuition we all share. It feels like there is a thinking thing, a mind, that is separate from the physical body. Descartes argued that the mind and the body were made of two completely different substances. The body was physical matter, a machine that followed the laws of nature. The mind, however, was non-physical. It was a kind of ghost in the machine. This idea is known as dualism. It is the belief that your consciousness, your inner world of thoughts and feelings, is fundamentally separate from your brain and body. This feels right to most of us. We talk about my body as if it is a possession. Something I have, not something I am. When you decide to raise your arm, it feels like a non-physical you gives a command to your physical body. The mind seems to be the pilot, the body the vessel it steers through the world. But this idea, as intuitive as it is, creates a huge problem. Scientists call this the interaction problem. If the mind is non-physical, how can it possibly interact with the physical body? How can a ghost pull a lever in a machine? For a thought to cause your arm to move, a non-physical event must somehow cause a physical event. This violates the fundamental laws of physics. There is no room for a ghost to step in and alter the chain of events. So, while dualism perfectly captures our common sense feeling, it has been almost universally rejected by scientists and most modern philosophers. The evidence is overwhelming that the mind is not separate from the brain. It is what the brain does. The ghost is slowly fading from the machine. So, if the self isn't actually a separate entity, then, what is it? Well, some philosophers like David Hume offered a pretty radical alternative. Hume was this 18th century Scottish philosopher. He took introspection really seriously. He looked inward, searching for this continuous stable self. And what did he find? Honestly, he found nothing. He reported finding only a stream of individual perceptions, thoughts, feelings, sensations, memories, one after another. But he could never find the I that was having these experiences. The self, he said, wasn't a thing at all, but rather a bundle of perceptions. Think of it like a movie. A movie is just a bunch of still images shown in rapid succession. When you watch it, you perceive a continuous story with moving characters. Hume argued our sense of self is like that. It's a story our brain tells by linking countless moments of experience. The self is the narrative, not the narrator. This idea is powerful. It lines up with what we know about the brain. Our brains are storytelling machines. They constantly make sense of the world, find patterns, create narratives. The feeling of being a self could be the ultimate story the brain tells. It creates a main character, me, and weaves a life story around it. This story gives us a sense of continuity. But this also means the self is fragile. If memory is damaged, like in amnesia, a person's sense of self can be radically changed or even lost. This shows the self isn't permanent or unchanging. It's an ongoing construction, constantly being updated. You're not a static entity. You are a story being written and rewritten in every single moment. No self is an island. A huge part of our identity isn't generated from within, but is reflected back at us from the minds of others. We're fundamentally social creatures. From the moment we're born, parents, friends, society at large, we learn about ourselves by seeing how others see us. This idea, called the looking glass self, imagine how we appear to others. Imagine their judgment, a feeling pride, a feeling shame. Think about how much of your behavior is tied to social roles: son, daughter, friend, employee, partner. Different version for your boss, different version for your best friend. Not masks hiding a true self, different facets in different contexts. Your self isn't monolithic, it's fluid and adapts to its audience. The brain has networks for social cognition, the mentalizing network. These circuits infer thoughts, feelings, intentions. This allows us to empathize, cooperate, see ourselves from another's perspective. When you worry what someone thinks, this network is working overtime. It runs a simulation of another mind, then updates your self-model. Part of your identity exists in a distributed network of minds around you. This explains why reputation, social acceptance matter so much. For ancestors, exile meant death. Our brains are hardwired to be sensitive to social feedback. Praise feels good, criticism hurts. We're constantly adjusting our self-concept from the social mirror. The story of me isn't a solo project. It's a collaborative novel, co-authored by everyone you've met, continuously shaping who you believe yourself to be. So we've journeyed through two vast and really different landscapes. First up, there's the world of philosophy, where for millennia thinkers have used logic and introspection to dissect the self. They've given us some pretty powerful metaphors: the ghost in the machine, the self as a bundle of perceptions, a narrative. These philosophical inquiries, they're like detailed portraits sketched from the inside out. They capture the subjective feeling of being a self, nuances, paradoxes, deep intuition that there's an I at the center of our experience. Then, we turn to the landscape of neuroscience. This approach is, well, more like an architectural blueprint drawn from the outside in. It doesn't really ask what the self feels like, but instead, how the brain builds it. Neuroscience shows us the machinery, the default mode network constructing our life story, the global workspace providing the stage for consciousness, and the interoceptive pathways anchoring our identity in the body. One is a personal story, the other, an impersonal mechanism. The philosophical self is the main character in the drama of life. The neuroscientific self is an emergent property of a biological computer, a clever model created for survival. The central question here is, can these two seemingly contradictory views be reconciled? By comparing them, we can start to understand the deep connection between our inner world of subjective feeling and the outer world of physical processes in the brain. So, where does this leave us? We have deconstructed the self, seen it as a story, a pattern, a useful illusion. Does this mean we should feel diminished? Does knowing the mechanics of the magic trick spoil the show? The answer is no. In fact, the opposite can be true. Understanding the nature of the self is not a path to nihilism, but a path to a profound and practical kind of freedom. Seeing the self for what it is, a construction of the mind, is the first step toward not being perpetually fooled by it. When you see that your anxious, self-referential thoughts are just the product of the default mode network, you can learn to not take them so personally. You don't have to believe every story the narrator in your head tells you. When a wave of anger arises or a wave of sadness arises, recognize it as a temporary pattern of energy and sensation in the body, rather than defining your entire being as I am angry. In this space, you find you have a choice. You are no longer a slave to every passing thought and emotion. This is the freedom from the prison of the self. This understanding also has the power to transform our relationship with others. If you see that your own self is a constructed story, you can begin to see that the same is true for everyone else. Seeing this can be a powerful antidote to hatred and resentment. It fosters compassion. The goal of this entire journey is not to destroy the self. The ego is a necessary tool for navigating the world. The goal is to wake up from the dream that you are your ego. It is to learn how to use this tool without being used by it. By combining the ancient wisdom of introspection with the modern insights of science, we can learn to see the self more clearly. We can recognize it as a transient process, a useful fiction, a pattern in the chaos, and in seeing it for what it is, we can find a deeper sense of peace, connection, and well-being, finally discovering that the real you is not the character in the story, but the silent, open awareness in which the story is told.